Welcome. It's great to have you here. Now, our chapter today is all about women and financial well-being. Let's meet our panellists. First, Paralympic gold medalist and ANZ ambassador, Dylan Alcott. Dylan, great you can join us again.
G'day, Brad. So good to be here, mate. I'll tell you what, I'm learning so much from this series. I really am, and very excited for today's episode.
Also joining us today is ANZ Deputy CEO and Group Executive Wealth Australia, Alexis George. Lex, thanks for joining us.
Can't wait. I think it's such an important topic and really looking forward to the conversation.
Our final panellist today is Dr. Suzy Green, clinical and coaching psychologist and CEO of the Positivity Institute. Suzy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is also a topic that is very close to my own heart and a topic that I've been learning a lot more about in the last 12 months or so in working with ANZ.
Okay, let's get started. Lex, young Australians across the board are doing it tough right now, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing some research and created an indicator with Roy Morgan since 2014, actually. So it's the first real data we've got on post-COVID and pre-COVID around financial wellbeing. And we've seen a significant drop. In fact, it's gone from 60.7 to about 56.5. And that is actually a really large drop in terms of people's financial wellbeing and has turned back all of the benefits that we got during late 2019. And as you just said, it's disproportionately affecting those younger people, younger single people and younger people with children. I think we can probably guess why, new entrants to the workforce. But I think what's also interesting is it's disproportionately affecting women as well. And in fact, if I look at the stats pre-COVID, you know, our average was 60.7. I'm being very precise here, but men were at 62.6 and women were at 58.9. And post-COVID, average 56.5. Men are at 58.4 and women at 55.1. So, you know, women and that younger generation are really being impacted much more than the general population.
And Suzy, that means a whole lot of stress.
Absolutely, and we know that financial stress is the largest cause of stress for Australians. My own Australian Psychological Society has records of that over previous years, but we're now experiencing additional stress. And I guess, again, we do a lot of work in workplaces and in schools. And I guess when you're looking at schools too, I think a large proportion of school teachers are women, and so they're having to deal with those challenges that schools are facing right now, and then also increased unpaid labour in the home as well, which I've read some research about today as well. So yes, even more stress than normal, I would say.
A recent financial wellbeing survey highlights that historically women will go to great lengths to avoid managing their finances and also talking about them. Lex, how do we change that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's a general thing around the Australian population and something we kind of have to address. But as you said, it is much more in the female population. And I think it's partly, because of history and societal, but women spend a lot more time thinking about financial decisions, and they really need to make sure they feel comfortable before they're happy to move forward. Whereas men tend to make, and I've seen a lot of research from this around the advice industry, men tend to make decisions more quickly. And so you really see a bit more procrastination in that female population. And I was just talking to our staff about this today, because finance is really scary, right? I live and breathe it every day. But a lot of people don't, and you don't realise that they haven't been educated about it in school. And so it's really scary. And as a result, you kind of think if you stick your head in the sand, it might go away, and it doesn't. So, I think just starting on that journey, one little step about understanding is really important. And that particularly goes for women. And they need that nurturing environment to take that step, I think.
So Lex, how do we support women to have more confidence around their finances?
I think having conversations like this is great, but I think involving them in the conversation, right? Not treating them, like they have no say in the way that the family budget is done. So that is really important for me. Involve women in the conversation, involve them in the major financial decisions, and listen to the views they have, because women tend to be more risk averse than men as well. And in this environment, that is not a bad thing, to have a bit of consideration of risk. So I think discussion, equal partners, support, and just take the time to explain. I think then you'll find that both of you will be better off, quite honestly.
And Suzy, there's clearly a lot of stress around finances, even more so in the current world we're living in.
Absolutely. And, really, it's one of our basic human needs is a sense of safety and security. And obviously finances play a large part there, particularly if you haven't got a lot of financial income as well. We do know from research that above a certain amount of money, and it's not, I can't actually put my finger on exactly, it's not a lot of money, but you don't get an extra happiness or well-being point, but you absolutely need a certain basic income to be able to cover those basic needs, to feel that sense of security. And we also know from psychological research that if you haven't got that sense of security, you become even more risk averse as well. So, one of the things that I've been talking a lot about through the last few months with COVID is basic stress management skills, basic anxiety management skills, because under, stress and duress, it is very difficult to think clearly and make good decisions as well. It can affect our health, from our physical health as well as our mental health. So anything you can do to reduce that stress. But I agree with Lex that it really needs to be, I know not everybody is in a relationship, but if you are, it's so important to be able to dedicate some time. And I know there are lots of other people talking about the concept of date night or financial date night, getting clarity on your values. Often, in my experience, most couples haven't even really talked about their values, and it's where these values clashes occur that the problems occur as well, and that can in many cases be around money. So what we're really talking about is building a strong relationship, strong positive relationship, and that openness and transparency and time allocated to talking about the things that really matter. And I think what COVID has done, at least in my experience, is that people seem to be willing to talk more about the things that matter right now. I don't know if that's everyone's experience, but particularly from a mental health perspective, people are more open to acknowledging the impact that stress has on our mental health and our well-being. And as we said before, financial stress is one of the biggest stressors on our mental health and well-being.
Dylan, how do you go about discussing finances with your partner? And also, what insights can you share about considerations when talking about money in our relationships?
I mean, as a young person, I'm 29. Does that count me as young still? I'm not sure. But, it wasn't on the agenda for my partner, Chantel, and I to talk about really, to be honest. Do you know when I first started talking about it was when I sang in the ads during the Australian Open. And I'd like to apologise to everyone for my singing voice on the ANZ ads, singing that I'm financing like I've never financed before. Yeah. But I've got to say, it was actually started, we've been going out a year. We'd never really communicated between us about our financial situation. And it was probably something that we should have done sooner. And I'm so glad that we did. But I mean, everything that we've touched on here, it's so important to be an active listener, rather than just contributing to what you think in terms of how the budget should happen and what should happen within the family household in terms of your finances. But I know I can speak for, as a young person, obviously the current crisis has hit, people differently across a whole bunch of different scopes. But for young people, it's pretty scary, to be honest. And I know I'm in a very lucky, privileged position where I've had a good steady income for a long time. But for a lot of my friends and my family and people around my age, it's tough because people probably weren't having those financial discussions like they should have. You don't plan for a pandemic or anything like that. So it's left people in a position whereby they're probably not as, set up as they probably wanted to be, because as we said, who knows what's going to happen in the future. And I'm so glad that we're putting a lens on women specifically here. But, I come from a minority group, being people with a disability. Imagine being a woman and having a disability. You know what I mean? it's hard enough for women to get positions in leaderships and to get up the chain in that because of things like discrimination and unconscious bias that currently exist. If you add on another minority group on top of that, whether it's your race or your disability or whatever it is, sometimes that hill is too steep to climb, and that's not the fault of anybody. It's up to all of us, especially males and people in leadership roles, to I guess eliminate those unconscious biases, because if they stay there at the moment, in addition to the pandemic, it's really going to hurt a lot of people. And I think it's important to have those discussions now.
A common definition of financial well-being is the extent to which someone is able to meet all of their current commitments and needs comfortably, and has the financial resilience to maintain this in the future. So Lex, I imagine because of the current financial climate, a lot of people aren't able to meet those commitments and needs.
Yeah, I think actually Dylan just said some really interesting things, and he said it as a young person that people don't think about putting away for a rainy day. And if you could just do one thing to improve your financial well-being, it is having that pot of savings of about 3 months, we would suggest. That is really difficult in the current environment, right, to start to talk about making that happen right now. But you can see the statistics that show if people did have that small pot of saving, that 3 months of saving, they're feeling much more comfortable now. And as I said, disproportionately women and younger people didn't have that. You're right that the definition you just gave is the right definition. The way I look at it is, do people feel comfortable about their future financial security? To be simple, and clearly women do not. Part of that's understanding, part of that's not having that pot, part of it's having typically more responsibility still in terms of putting food on the table or making sure the children's school fees are paid. So I think there's many factors that come to play there.
Lex, what advice do you have for women who want to achieve financial well-being?
Yeah, I mean, we're on an ANZ video, so I actually feel okay about promoting ANZ. But honestly, there are some fantastic tools on our website around financial wellbeing. I don't know if you did any of them, Dylan, when you were doing your singing, but they really are quite good and they're quite simple. I went through them myself and learnt some things that I didn't know about, but there's some great simple education, even just talking about budgeting. So there's tools out there, many of them. What I would say, just take one minor step forward towards engaging with your finances. As Suzy said, it'll certainly help with your mental well-being if you deal with your financial well-being. They're all intricately linked. Just one step, even just thinking about a budget. That's what I would encourage. Just take one minor step forward. Understand your spending, think about a budget, because I don't think any of us do that. And there's a plethora of tools out there, some really good ones that will help you focus. And can I say, as a mother of younger children, it's really important to talk to your kids about it as well. Mine aren't children anymore, they're young adults, only slightly younger than Dylan, so that's how old I am. But it's really important to talk to your kids about that and to talk to them about finances, the importance of saving, the importance of budgeting, so that we don't continue this dearth in financial literacy.
So, Suzy, is the key here to get into good financial habits early?
I think so. I mean, the compound interest is just a basic law, I guess, or that we could learn a lot about. I guess as a woman growing up in the area I grew up in, I really had no financial literacy, and I guess I also grew up in the stage where you got married and you had children, and I'm the first person in my family to go to university, so I've had to learn the hard way. And I wish that I'd had a program at school around financial literacy, and I know ANZ do support a financial literacy program, which I think is absolutely fabulous, and we need that in schools as well. And we also know from some research, and I often quote this in some of our work in schools, that there are mindsets or beliefs that women pass on intergenerationally to their daughters if they have a belief that they're no good at mathematics, then those beliefs can get passed on as well. So as a parent, and look, I know it's the hardest job I've ever done, but the greatest investment you can make in yourself is going to absolutely flow onto your children. But, observing, being aware of your own thoughts or beliefs that you have around your capability around finances, and perhaps setting a small goal. If you're fortunate enough to have had some good habits instilled, you're far ahead of others that haven't had that, or good role modelling. But we've got over 40 years of research on goal setting and the impact it can have on goal attainment and well-being. But even just starting to set some small goals, and the earlier you can do that with children, you are teaching them that they are able to set a goal and work towards it, and not get instant gratification, which is also a real challenge, which a lot of the younger population, some may have had the privilege of having instant gratification, but I can tell you from a psychological perspective, you're not doing your children any good by giving them instant gratification, because it's actually through the striving process that the well-being comes, working for something. And it builds every time you reach a sub-goal, a small goal, you're building up your sense of confidence and competence to take the next step. And one of the factors that I came across in the research around financial well-being was confidence in abilities to be able to manage finances. So the more that we can do, and perhaps ideally through goals and then habits, accompanying habits, is going to absolutely impact our financial well-being.
And Lex, what advice can you offer younger Australians who want to support their parents and their grandparents who might not have the confidence around dealing with their finances?
The stress of not getting engaged is far more than taking one step forward. Yeah. And, in Australia, the reality is if you don't engage with it, you can have a nice retirement or you can have a terrible retirement. And that's what I would explain to them. It can make a real difference, just a little bit of saving. Compound interest is important. Unfortunately, low interest rates at the moment, but still it's important, and it can change your life. So I think, to just constantly say, I can't change my habits now, is a bit of a cop-out. We all know we can change habits. It just takes time and a bit of effort, actually. And if the goal and the reward is good enough, we do it.
And there is research to show you can teach old dogs new tricks. No one said it was going to be, overnight or easy, but it's possible. And it is about setting small steps, building up your competence and confidence, setting another one, and having some support. So whether you set goals with your partner or with a good buddy, or perhaps there are, again, some financial literacy counselling programs, you might seek some assistance. You will build your confidence each baby step that you take.
And celebrate the success, by the way, because too often we're too critical of ourselves, and we move straight to the next goal without celebrating that we achieved one.
Lex, I'm embarrassed to say that years ago, I used to line up at the post office to pay my bills. It took me forever, but I didn't know of all the options out there. The reality is, though, is for all of us, there is so much support around finance now.
Hey, Brad, I didn't even know you could pay bills at the post office. There you go. And
I'm sure he doesn't know what a check is.
No. So there really are easier ways of doing things now, aren't there?
And can I tell you, you say that, and this crisis that we're in now, which started off as a health crisis and probably is an economic crisis as well, has really accelerated the manner in which people do make their lives easier and deal digitally. Like if you look at the digital transactions in banking versus the going to a branch or physical ones, it's exponential change. And I think that is a great thing, because it does force people to engage, right? And you see that balance when you go into the app, and you see it nudging you to think about saving or nudging you to set goals. So I think it's fantastic. And you talked about the older generation, but actually the more, I like to call them more mature, because I'm one of them, the more mature generation actually is really engaging with digital tools now and is right up there in terms of the numbers.
And Lex, as a long-time Lifeline volunteer, you've always been passionate about mental health and well-being. The current COVID situation just adds another level of stress, doesn't it?
Oh, I mean, you're seeing it play out, and I think Suzy just talked about it. the mental stress in our society, or mental well-being in our society at the moment is huge. And I think it's largely around uncertainty. You know, it's uncertainty about what's going to happen. We've seen unemployment rise a little bit, but because of the government programs to date, it's largely been staved off. But people are really, really concerned about what's going to happen in the future. And actually, if I look at the stats we've got right now, they are saving more. To be honest, there's more saving than there was, because they're trying to prepare for that, and that's a good thing. But that's not going to go away in the short term, Brad, and that, you know, feeling comfortable about the future that is really concerning our staff, our customers, and the community in general. And that is something that I think is really hard to deal with, because, you know, we all know once you have a little bit of control back, you can start to relieve some stress. And at the moment, it's a pretty uncertain environment we're living in. So,
Suzy, would your advice be to have conversations, even though they might be difficult?
Absolutely. And I guess lean into it. And one of the, I guess, highly recommended psychological approaches right now is about learning to sit with discomfort rather than trying to get rid of it. I mean, nobody wants to feel discomfort, but learning to sit with a little bit of discomfort, knowing that in the long run it's going to pay off by, you know, a lot of the techniques that were found in the surveys that I reviewed is that men and women, but avoided looking at their finances. They prefer to do juice cleanses and go to the dentist than look at their finances. But I guess, you know, from a coaching perspective, we would recommend that, you know, and as much as it's so hard to predict our future, we are living in a VUCA world. This is this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. And it existed before COVID hit, and it's going to continue. Like, this is just, I guess, a prime example of living in a VUCA world. And that's really challenging because, as I said, as humans, we have this basic need for security, but we are going to need to learn, and this is why these skills are being taught to children in schools now, to sit with discomfort and to be able to be psychologically flexible, to disengage from a goal and re-engage in another goal. Yeah. And these are skills that you can learn. And as I said, they're starting to be taught in schools, which is really inspiring for me. But you can learn them through, you can pick up a book and learn some basic thinking skills to help you understand the thoughts that might be helping you, the thoughts that might be hindering when it comes to your financial situation. And mindfulness, a lot of people will have been hearing about mindfulness again prior to COVID, but right now it's probably a non-negotiable, having a basic, and it might be another form of meditation, but some form of mental, I guess, practice. And that then can translate, builds up your capacity to focus in the here and now rather than catastrophizing about what could happen in the future, or, you know, ruminating on what you should have done, the bad decisions you've made. The mindfulness allows you to be in the moment. And there's also a whole lot of application when it comes to money, about being really mindful about what you're spending your money on. And as Lex said, I think now more than ever, having a bit of a secure, you know, base of money there is probably one of the smartest things that you could do would be to have that money, that saving there, given we have such an uncertain future.
So then what does the conversation around financial well-being look like?
You know, that's an interesting question. And I had to do something with my 25-year-old daughter recently where we did an interview, and I asked her the learnings from her mother. I was horrified to think what she was going to say, actually. But one of the things she said, and I felt so proud, was that the learning she'd had from her mother was to manage her own finances and know where things had gone and been spent. And I thought, I didn't realise that was something she'd learned from me, but I felt very proud that she'd learnt that, actually, because we've always talked about know where your money's going, make sure you have to work for things, you have to set goals. So it even comes down in my mind to pocket money. You know, Suzy just mentioned it before. You have to do something for your pocket money. It's not just a handout and the instant gratification. And you have to save for something you really want rather than your parents just giving it to you. Now, in my childhood, I was lucky or unlucky enough that you had to do that because there was no way my parents were going to be able to give instant gratification. But I really was conscious about that with my children. So it's, it's talking about the pocket money, setting the goals, little things, making them work for it. I think they're really important to instill the right values for later in life, because things don't come to you easily. And then you're going to make bad decisions, right? We all make bad decisions. It's how you choose to deal with them. And Suzy just said that. But I read a great psychology piece this week that said a bad decision is like one of those unwanted party guests. They come, and what are you going to do about it? You let it ruin your whole night, or you just accept it and move on and make a new decision. And so I think it's really important to understand you are going to make mistakes. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and carry on to the next goal and celebrate the next success.
Yeah, I think that there's a large dose of compassion that's needed to, I guess, for ourselves as women. And perhaps, I know for me, as I mentioned before, looking back I didn't have, I came from a family where my mum stayed at home, and, my dad took care of the finances. And so I didn't have that role modelling to that degree. But yeah, I think we need to have a little bit of compassion, because not everybody and all women have had that role modelling, which is why the education component is so important. And I mean, even, the public dissemination of information that I know ANZ and other financial institutions are doing, it's so important. And then building up that, as I said, that sense of confidence for women. And, whether that's through support from their partners or family or friends as well, that they can do it, they can be in charge of their finances. And it's actually quite exciting once you do. I mean, I run a small business as well, and one of the biggest impacts that I read about too is income variability. And as many small business owners will know, that's one of the greatest challenges that you face with small business. So yeah, having that sense of compassion, learning what you can, and learning from those mistakes as well, and getting back up and having another go.
Lex, in finishing, what are your tips for achieving financial wellbeing?
Firstly, start. Actually, start. Take one step over that starting line and engage with your finances. Set, as we've discussed today, some realistic goals that you can attain, and then celebrate and go for the next goal. But just start with some small step, either saving, budgeting, whatever.
Thank you, Suzy and Lex, for your fabulous advice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A really insightful conversation. Lex, isn't it wonderful to be able to pass on this advice and help people?
Absolutely. And look, I think it's such an important topic, and any way we can get females and the younger generation engaged, I'm willing to give it a go. So thank you for raising that.
Suzy, you're all about positivity. I imagine your advice is to try and stay positive?
To try and stay as positive as possible. We actually know from the research, it broadens your perception. You see more options, you're more likely to achieve your goals. And
Dylan, wonderful to have your insights once again.
Good on you, Brad. And I strongly believe in role models, and how good are these two ladies as role models for everybody. But also, it's up to all of us to continue to provide opportunities for everybody, but especially women, people in minority groups. And I guess it's impressive to hear that these tools are available so we can continue to improve.
Absolutely. Thank you to Lex, Suzy and Dylan. And thank you for joining us on the Wellbeing Conversation.
Hey everyone, Dylan Alcott again. Now, we touched on a few topics around mental health throughout that chat. Now, if that brought up anything for you, make sure you reach out to beyondblue.org.au, or their phone number is 1300 22 4636. You can also hit up Lifeline on 13 11 14, or reach out to the people within your ANZ teams and they'll be able to help.